What up, nerds? Welcome back. My name is Leslie Smith, and today on the Nerdy Narrative, we're going to talk about what happens when two serial killers start to compete with each other. I'm talking about the latest release in Meg Gardiner's UNSUB series, which is a very high-octane thriller series called SHADOWHEART. If you've been around the channel for a little while, you may have seen the reviews that I've put up recently, all non-spoiler, for the first 3 books in this series, which I would say you absolutely could read each of these 4 books as standalones. There's one eensy weensy teensy tiny plot line that does connect all 4 books. I do think it's going to eventually be its own book, but you could get away with reading each one on its own. Each one is a hunt for a different serial killer, which is part of the main character's job as an FBI profiler. I've been addicted to this series ever since I started it a few weeks ago when my friend Ev sent me the first book, UNSUB. I just started this series. I haven't been able to stop, and now I have to because I'm at the end of what Meg Gardiner has published in it so far. It was just published by Blackstone Publishing on June 18th of 2024, so it's still a very young series. And now that it's over, well, what else is there to do but read more of Meg Gardiner's work? I've already picked out my next book that I'm going to read by her, but we'll talk about that later. So each one of the books in this series is inspired by a different real-life serial killer. The serial killer that SHADOWHEART was inspired by is Samuel Little, who confessed to murdering 93 people, mostly women, between 1970 and 2005. Something that Meg Gardiner does that appeals to the true crime junkie in me. I have seen so many specials, so many documentaries, movies. I've read so many books about real-life serial killers and fictional ones. So even though each of these books has a serial killer inspired by a real killer, has a lot of the same characteristics, she always includes a twist, something that makes them unique to what she's writing about. And in this case, the big one is there's a copycat serial killer that has come out of the woodwork, and it all started at a Tennessee prison when Ephraim Judah Good began drawing portraits of women that he claimed were his victims. These portraits were drawn with such detail, they were such good work, that the authorities were able to comb through missing women records and make a match. Once the news outlets caught wind of what was happening here and they started airing other portraits of women that Ephraim Judah Good had drawn that they had not been able to identify a match around the country, families with missing relatives start just inundating with phone calls, seeking answers, and trying to determine if any of the victims were one of their missing relatives. A few days after all of this information has begun releasing to the public, bodies start popping up in New York. Very quickly, there's a connection made between what's happening in Tennessee and New York. This new killer poses duct-taped bodies at the same site as Ephraim Judah Good's murders. So a connection is made between the two, and the FBI, Caitlin Hendricks, our main character who has been in all of the books of the series so far, Caitlin is trying to figure out what the connection is between these two killers. She initially thinks it's a copycat killer who is trying to get the attention of Ephraim Judah Good as a compliment. Very quickly, she realizes that's not the case. In fact, these two killers are somehow communicating with one another and they are locked in a rivalry. In my opinion, SHADOWHEART is the best book in the UNSUB series so far, but I have to remind you all that I have been familiar with all of the serial killers that inspired the first 3 books. Samuel Little I wasn't familiar with at all, so I didn't have any clues as to what may be happening in this one. It was a whole new experience with me, but it really left me breathless several times. The entire book, they're operating on a timeline. They're trying to get as much information out of Ephraim Judah Good as they can while he's willing to cooperate, trying to identify victims, they're trying to contact families, and then it just turns into a hurricane once this other serial killer enters onto the scene and just dropping bodies, just whoever gets in their way, and they are in a serious crunch trying to identify who this person is, what their connection is, try to catch them, put a stop to them. You just really can't breathe in some spots. Meg Gardiner just really outdid herself with Shadowheart as far as intrigue, pacing, the plot. I just could not put this one down. Something that she did a lot of in her previous 3 books, she spent a lot of time on atmosphere, just the fear that communities and cities and even states will feel when there's a serial killer on the loose. With this one having the focus on the rivalry between the serial killers, I thought it was a wise decision to really amp up the intrigue and dial back on the atmosphere. I don't think you could have really balanced between the two here. I also like how she put a lens on the FBI and local law enforcement, just how they are forced to react on their feet when things happen. If you've seen any of the other reviews that I have done for the books in this series, I've always mentioned that I do not like the main character, FBI profiler Caitlin Hendricks. For me, where Meg Gardiner has always shown as far as characters are secondary characters. But this author just has a knack. It's like she knows the one character I'm going to fall in love with, and she has brutally, gruesomely killed every one of them off so far except one. And the 3rd book, the one I love the most, did not die. And I thought, cool, we've broken the cycle. Nope, book 4, Shadowheart, killed them off. Oh, it was so heartbreaking. I cried. This one made me cry. The other 2 I got off okay. I just kind of hurt. It just came out of nowhere. Even when I had the small inkling that this one was about to possibly put themselves in danger, I was like, no way would Meg Gardiner do this to this character. And she did. This woman takes the whole killing of the darlings very seriously. Like, girl. That's a wrap for all of my thoughts and opinions about my reading experience of Shadowheart by Meg Gardiner. In the description box below, I will have a link to Meg Gardiner's website if you would like to read more about her. She is currently on book tour for Shadowheart, which I got to meet her and got her to sign my whole series while she was here. Last I checked, she still has a few stops left on her tour. I'll have her website. I'll have a place to where you can find the book. I will link the other video reviews for the other books in the series if you want to check all that out. Thank you all so much for watching today. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button down below so I know how much you enjoyed it. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll catch you in the next one.